All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to welcome on the Ray Carr Show, Mitch Lewis. Mitch, how you doing?
Good, Ray. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. A little trouble with our phone lines, but we're going to get through this. Mitch, you're an astrologer, you're an author, you're pretty much almost everything. So tell me a little bit about your career.
I'm not everything by any means, Ray, but I spend most of my career in the arts. I'm a musician and a songwriter, but I've done astrology since many years.
Right.
And I always had an astrology business on the side. And when it got difficult to deal with being a musician anymore, I moved more into astrology, wound up going down to the commodities floor for a number of years where I learned about finances, something most musicians don't know much about.
That's very true.
And got very involved in what we call mundane astrology, which is the events of the world. And I've made a number of very successful predictions through the years.
What are some of those predictions?
Well, I was on Jenny Lynch's TV show on a regular basis, and for a good year or so before 9/11, I was warning about a very bad terrorist attack on our territory, on our land, and because I was using the chart of Manhattan from the 1600s, not New York City, it showed up very prominently there. So I was predicting an attack on Manhattan Island,
Goodness gracious.
A very bad terrorist one for a good year in advance. I predicted the rise of oil prices when it was trading $32 a barrel, that it would hit $100 a barrel as Pluto, which rules oil, went into Sagittarius, the sign of expansion. I was doing a series of lectures at the Princeton Club at the time in front of a number of financiers. So I was trying to build my reputation in that business, and they were absolutely blown out. Year after year, they came back as oil went up to the point where they didn't have a room big enough for the last lecture. It was just hilarious. It was spilling out into the hallway.
Oh, I can imagine.
The very top of the housing market, when Saturn left Cancer in 2005 in July, that was the very top. That's when the trouble started to really show itself. I predicted that to the month, and I predicted the crash of '08 within a week of its occurrence, at least a year and a half in advance.
Mitch, do you see a lot of, I mean, I know you can't really go into, because it's very a deep topic, but is America really in a lot of trouble or not?
Well, I think the whole world is in a lot of trouble. What I see happening is this. First of all, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and everybody thinks that everybody's trying to, what's basically happening is I think humanity is in a race against time, because oil, we're very short-sighted. We only live about 80 years or so, 90, whatever, so we don't think in big terms.
Right.
But from a Sagittarian point of view, from an expansive point of view, everybody is racing to figure out what to do when the oil runs out, or it becomes so difficult to breathe that we have to change it. And for example, in Beijing, at noon, you can't see your hand in front of your face. It's so polluted. The Chinese are aware of this. Everybody's aware of it.
Yeah.
Russia's aware of it, and that's why they're fighting to keep the price of oil high, because it's the only export they have.
Right.
That's the only thing their entire economy is running on. That and vodka and caviar. It's not going to really make it. They don't produce much. They don't export much.
Right.
So they've got to do something when the oil runs out or becomes unprofitable to use. The Chinese are spending a fortune on solar energy. So are the Germans. Germans want nothing to do with oil. They want nothing to do with nuclear. They're going to figure it out. And they got between them and other countries, and they're going to work out something. As to whether humanity will make it in time, that's the issue.
And
I see the really worst problem is the ecology. I'm not that concerned about a massive nuclear war. I don't think humanity is that psychotic. I could see, some lunatic grabbing one, something terrible happening, most definitely possible. But a massive nuclear war doesn't solve any problems. Nobody wants that. So I don't think that's the answer, or that's the real problem. The real problem is that we're poisoning ourselves.
And do you think...
And the economy that we've developed, this capitalist economy throughout the world, we won the Cold War, so to speak. Everybody's a capitalist now. And I have nothing against capitalism. If you work hard, you should be able to make money and have a nice house and then whatever, 2 dogs and, But the problem is that that capitalism got out of hand. It's all about corporate profits. It's all about making more money than you made last year. But there's only so many people. And there's only so much garbage that they're going to buy.
Right,
and that's what the entire world is based on now. And as we enter the Aquarian age, we've all heard about it, of course. Everybody knows, oh, yeah, this is the dawning of the... Truth is that the age of Aquarius is the age of corporations, not the age of the individual. That's right. Leo. This is the opposite. This is big corporations, and they're doing exactly what you would expect them to do as we enter the Aquarian age, the same way that as we entered the Pisces age 2,000 years ago, the Catholic Church took over Europe.
Okay.
Because Pisces rules religion. And it made perfect sense if you look back on it. And now as we enter into the Aquarian age, this also makes perfect sense. Technology is all Aquarian. Robots will be invented. We'll invent robots that make robots. And we're going to have all kinds of problems with this capitalist system because if people don't make a living and they don't have something to do with themselves, what are you going to do? Then you can't sell more stuff, then the stocks don't go up, and so on.
Right.
And therein lies the crux of human, problems at the moment. And we see it happening because of the balance of power has been accumulated by such a small group. The Walmart family, I believe, has as much money as the bottom 25% of Americans or something. I'm not sure what the numbers are. But they're outrageous. And corporations are controlling, and now they're buying politicians, and the Supreme Court is allowing them to do so, and.
Right.
And if it continues to go that way, we're going to find that humanity has less and less to do. So, these are the problems. These are the issues that I see as the big thing. Putin giving us trouble or giving the Ukrainians trouble, that's going to be a mess. It's part of this grand cross astrologers have been talking about. And it's hitting Putin's sun, and it's hitting America's sun. And it's a very, very active and dangerous situation. Truth is, Putin's doing this for several reasons. One is he wants to have a clear path to the ocean, to the sea. He wants to get his oil out through there. Second of all, if he stirs up trouble, the price of oil goes up as it's been going up. It's at about, I don't know where it is today, but it's like $103, $104 a barrel.
Right.
When oil goes above a certain price, the Russians get rich. When it goes below a certain price, they slip into recession.
Well, if I may, Mitch, I'm just very curious. How did you know that looking at the stars could lead us to these answers that you're telling us about?
Well, some of this is common sense, Ray. It's not,
sure it is.
I don't believe that astrology is separate from things. I think that it is integrated into everything else. A good astrologer should know some psychology, some history, some nutritional things. There's many, many things that my clients come to me for. So as I studied it through the years, and then when I got onto the floor of the exchange and I started to see how things worked, and I saw a bigger picture, and I started to see, well, my God, how come the price of coffee rose so much? And then the traders told me because the junta goes out in the middle of the night, takes the coffee, hides it somewhere. There's no coffee. The price of coffee runs up. They sell their futures. They put the coffee back. The price of coffee goes down. That there are manipulations on such large scales that we don't even recognize them as such. We're reading about it more and more. And so the chart, what the charts do is they allow me to focus down. Okay. See, I see a big picture, then I use the charts to focus down. For example, the stock market crash happened in 2008 because there were 5 passes of Saturn opposing Uranus. Saturn is stability, Uranus is instability. So when those two come into contact, something's got to give. And the first pass fell exactly on the New York Stock Exchange's Mars, which, based on my studies, puts I give it a 10 a.m. That's when the Buttonwood Agreement was, I believe, signed, and and that rules its 10th house of career. It was a gimme as far as I was concerned. That crash was going to happen, as well as a reversal in power, in political power. After 8 years of Bush, there was no question but whoever ran for the Democratic Party would win, and it would be something very unusual, either a woman or a black man. And there you go; those were the two choices. So it all plays out via astrology when you understand the symbolism of it.
Right. Mitch Lewis, our special guest, the astrologer, author, and, Mitch, I want to ask you about your book, if I may. Tell me a little bit about your writings and some of the things that you've written, most recently.
Well, I've always been a writer, and I've written hundreds of songs, had one on the charts, had a number recorded, whatever, it's a struggle. And I've always written short stories and a couple of plays, a musical. I have a play about Nostradamus I wrote. But I got the idea for an astrologer detective many, many years ago. My brother and I were both studying astrology, and we came up with the idea. And as of other astrologers, it's a good idea. It's a great concept. So when I started to work on these books, this is now the third in the series. It's called Evil in the First House. The other two are Murder in the 11th House and Death in the 12th House. And obviously I'm going around the zodiac and hoping to get the 12 of them done. And it's about my protagonist is David Lowell, a wealthy financial astrologer who owns a townhouse in Manhattan. If I can't be rich, there's no reason why my characters shouldn't be. And he uses astrology to solve murders, primarily.
So it's really a microcosm and kind of a reflection of you.
Well, I mean, there's a great deal of me in my character. I think you have to if you're, if you're going, even if you're writing cross-gender or you're writing about another generation, it's the individual writer's voice that's coming out one way or another.
Mitch, can we take some phone calls and maybe have anybody has any questions about perhaps about their chart or anything like that?
Well, I tell you the truth, Ray. I mean, I'll do it, but I hate to do these quickie readings because people think that these are astrology readings, and they're really not.
Right.
They'll give me their birth time. I'll look at it on the computer. I'll tell them a couple of things, and then a lot of people figure, well, that's it. That's like reading their astrology in the newspaper.
Well, I mean, if anybody had any questions about astrology in particular.
Yeah, no, and I tell you the truth, Ray. As long as people understand that that's my feelings about it, I'll be happy to take readings and look at people's charts quickly if they like. But sure, let's take some calls.
All right. Our telephone lines are 216-687-3515. If you'd like to talk to Mitch Lewis, he's quite an extraordinary individual. His book, we're going to give one of his books away, by the way, at the end of the interview. Mitch, a question I have as we're filtering through the calls here. Where did this interest in astrology really start, and what is the biggest myth that you found out working with astrology?
You mean where did astrology start in my life or originally?
When did you really find out that astrology is something you were really, really interested in?
In the late 70s, I was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which was having a huge explosion in astrology. Some of the great astrologers of the last few generations were living up there. Rob Hand and Isabel Hickey and, I don't know, a bunch of them. Maybe they were in New York, some of them, but I met them up there. And I got a reading from my neighbor, and she knew nothing about me, and she told me more about myself than anybody, including therapists, had ever been able to see in an hour reading. And I called my brother. I said, I just got an astrology reading. He said, so did I. I said, wow, that's great. So he sent me to his astrologer, the guy he'd given him the reading. He told me the same thing, but with his own slant. And different things were important, and he saw things from a different perspective, but he saw the same basic concepts that Jane had seen. I even came across her notes recently. I was quite impressed with her. So I immediately began to study it, as did my brother and a number of our friends, and got just, I don't know, I can't tell you. It's an amazing discipline. It's an amazing thing, and I'd say that the biggest misconception I have is, first of all, as my protagonist says in the books, astrology is never wrong. Astrologers, on the other hand, not just because somebody studies astrology doesn't mean they know what they're doing. Absolutely, right. Like, within any other field, and they may know the terms and they may know this or that, but a really good practitioner of anything has to have the talent and has to put the work into it.
Okay.
So that, it doesn't come easy either. It's a lifetime study, or as we feel, a multi-lifetime study, because everything is connected, and it's the connection of things that is what astrology is. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it absolutely did. Absolutely did, Mitch. Thank you. We have a phone call right here. You're on the radio.
Hello?
Hello, you're on the radio.
Hello. How's it going?
It is going fantastic. You're speaking with Mitch Lewis, astrologer and author.
Exciting.
Well, tell me your question, please.
I was just wondering what the lunar eclipse had to do with the astrologic cycle.
Well, eclipses are, as I'm sure you know, they've been studied for millennium by humans. We consider them quite an interesting moment. And the ancient civilizations, some of them were able to predict the eclipses for hundreds of years in advance. They represent times of beginnings and ends a lot. Also, the eclipse like this one, because it's being surrounded by what we call the Grand Cross, is extremely potent. It's in Libra. It'll have a lot to do with relationships. Mr. Putin, his chart is not being, well, it's being activated by this, so I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw an escalation in the Ukrainian situation over the next couple of weeks. But as individuals, anything in your life that has come to a peak but hasn't really been resolved yet will start to grab your attention. A relationship, a job, whatever the situation is, if you're dissatisfied with it or if it's simply not helping you grow, you're going to be pushed over the next couple of weeks, certainly, until the new moon, but also eclipses, because the new moon is also, it's a solar eclipse at 8 degrees of Taurus. So the eclipses seem to work over a period of months, not weeks. And you may see events that begin today, tomorrow, the next few days, but that won't be completely resolved for 6 months or so. And it's because it's in Libra, like I said, it has much to do with our interaction with each other, as opposed to financial matters. I mean, everything's going to be up in the air. You know, the stock market's taken a terrible hit lately, and it's just beginning its correction. But it's not a crash; it's just a correction. And the eclipse is pointing out places in the markets, as in our own lives, where there's a shakiness, where it's got to be resolved. And if it's not resolved, then it turns to crisis. See, I believe in free will. I'm a free will astrologer. I don't think it's all predestined. If it was, what's the point of studying it?
Right, exactly.
So
right.
we have a lot of influence over what we can do within our limitations, you know. And if we learn how to use it properly, not just astrology, you don't have to be an astrologer. If we learn how to use our lives and the ebb and flow of them properly, we don't fight, you know, against the current as much. It's an easier life. But this is a moment of crisis in various places in the world, and it will show up over the next few months. Again, it's not the end of the world, and, you know, nobody's going out of business. It's just going to be a difficult time, and individuals who get hit by this eclipse will be, you know, primarily will feel the effects of it on their own personal lives.
Well, thank you for the call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Telephone number is 216-687-3515. And let's take another call. You're on the radio with Mitch Lewis.
Yeah, hey Mitch, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. Long time listener, first time caller to the Ray Carr Show. Listen every morning, Ray. Love the show.
Thank you.
Would like to ask you, with this new edition of a planet, which of the astrological signs are the true ones to follow? Because in some I'm a Taurus, but in others I'm an Aries.
What planet are you talking about? Wait, well, first of all, what's your name?
My name is Dan.
Dan? All right, what planet are you talking about? You're talking about the trans-Pluto planets, the ones that are at the very outer. You're talking about this planet that they wrote about a few years ago. I forget the name of it. You've got a funny name.
The planet that was of a few years ago.
Okay. Now, first of all, that planet it's not a new discovery. Every 20 years or so, the media jumps on things that they think they've discovered that astrologers who spend their lifetime studying it aren't aware of. It's almost comical, at least in our business. The 13th sign and the rest of this, and the fact that the signs have moved, none of that affects astrology. Astrology is not astronomy. There is a difference. Our astrology, Western astrology, is based on the ecliptic and the signs that were on it when this began and the planets that touch it, and that's astrology. We add new heavenly bodies when they're discovered. For example, Chiron was discovered in the 70s. It's an asteroid between Saturn and Uranus, whereas most of the asteroids are between Jupiter and Saturn. I use Chiron quite a bit. It has a lot to do with healing. It has a lot to do with health issues. Also, it is the wounded healer in mythology, and where it falls in one's chart is where one tends to suffer for those we love, if you will. But they're minor planets. The asteroids, I also feel, are minor planets. They're not. I don't find them all that effective. I'll have arguments with astrologers about it because we all have our opinions. But as they discover more planets outside of Pluto, they'll have an effect. Every time we discover a new planet, it represents a rise in consciousness in humanity. When we discovered Uranus in the 1700s, Uranus rules revolution. Guess what? Shortly after the discovery of Uranus, America and France had their revolutions. It also represents electricity. Ben Franklin went out with a kite one day and, almost electrocuted himself. They were harnessing the energy of Uranus, which humanity had attempted to do for thousands of years, but were only capable of doing it once that planet was discovered, because it only represents humankind going to a higher level. And by the way, the planets aren't doing anything to us. Pluto is not pulling me this way and differently than you, and we're sitting on the same couch. That's ridiculous. It has to do with the internal changes in the individual and in the collective that's reflective out in the planets. Then when they discovered Neptune in the 1800s, medicine took a huge jump. Anesthesia, aspirins, all kinds of things that we take for granted now came about as Neptune was discovered. Also, the Civil War was around that time, and the horrors of it forced us to grow in terms of medicine and technology and things like that. Also, Neptune rules spirituality. Seances became very popular in the late 1800s. Then Pluto was discovered in 1930, and Pluto rules, among other things, Nazis and oil. Well, within a few years, the Nazi Party came into existence. And when I say Nazis, I mean the compulsiveness and the desire to control within the collective or the individual. And right at the time that Pluto was discovered, the first degree in a brand new field of petrol engineering was handed out in Texas. So it coincides and represents a rise in our collective consciousness. Now, when they decided to deplanetize Pluto, well, interestingly enough, that occurred after a great alignment in Taurus, which is in the opposite sign that Pluto rules, and it was a tug away from the collective. Pluto rules things held jointly together, such as Social Security, pension funds. And look at the beating these things have all taken, and now the Republicans were trying to prioritize Social Security and all these changes that are occurring within our sense of collective wealth. And how many pensions went bankrupt, and the housing catastrophe that put Iceland out of business. I mean, this was all Pluto. They deplanetized Pluto as they attempted to shrink down what they call the entitlement programs.
Mitch,
and that's all Pluto ruled.
We have to give an ID here real quick. You're listening to WCSB Cleveland. I apologize. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Anyway, that's how I feel about it. So when we discover new planets, new heavenly bodies, they have a place within our consciousness. Some, I believe, are more important than others, but other astrologers would disagree. They're perfectly willing. I'm perfectly willing to always discuss all of this with them and see their research. But this is one fascinating field. I mean, I'm not telling everybody should go out and become an astrologer. It takes a lot of work, and it's a difficult business. But studying a little bit of it, or understanding it, or keeping your mind open to its possibilities, that's what I'm trying to do with the books. I'm writing fiction, and they're fun reads, so I'm told, and good characterization, and they're fun. And then I give you enough astrology within it so that you might go, wow, that's interesting, but I'm not going to go study it, but, that's interesting. And I get a lot of emails. I got an email from one woman, I'm an astrologer, my husband thinks I'm an idiot for studying it. He read your book, now he wants to study it.
Wow. Thank you, Dan, for the call.
Thank you, Ray.
Our telephone line at 216-687-3515 here at WCSB in Cleveland, Ohio. Mitch Lewis, our special guest. Mitch, you're a fascinating man with a lot of insight in this area, and I just every time I just let you go because I learn so much by just opening up my ears and just taking in all this information. It's incredible, really is.
That's very kind of you, Ray. That's terrific. It's nice to hear.
I've always wondered, I don't know much about my astrological chart, and I don't want to get into it now because I understand, it takes a long time to do that. But I just want to ask you about, I was born in September. How much significance, is it the month, or is it the day or the time that means most when you're doing a chart?
It's all of it. See, one of the problems I have, horoscope is a Greek word. It means chart of the hour. Mm-hmm. And as the Greeks got more and more into focusing on the individual as opposed to the king and country with astrology, the time of birth became very, very important. I do a lot of medical work, and I'll look at a chart and I'll see that the ruler of the 7th house, which is Libra's house, is being badly afflicted, and I'll ask the person, how's your lower back? Any trouble with your kidneys? Oh my God, I had kidney stones. How did you know? And that's based on the exact moment of their birth, which I work on in this new book, as a matter of fact. It's got to do with medical astrology and twins. Certainly, as a Virgo, you're going to show some of those Virgoian qualities. Most of us do display our sun qualities, but, you know, you've heard these expressions, of course, your rising sign or your ascendant.
Yes.
That's what you look like. I'm a Cancer, but I've got a Sagittarius ascendant. When people first get to know me, they think I'm a Sagittarius. I'm outgoing, I'm very personable, I do all this stuff and whatnot, but really underneath it, I'm a Cancer. So I'm what they call an extroverted introvert. There's a whole side of me that's Cancerian, wants to sit and watch TV, and I don't want to be around people too much, and then there's the Sag side that comes out. And so we're extremely complicated individuals, and that's why it takes so long to understand astrology, to really do it well. Anybody can learn the key phrases and give a half-baked reading, and they'll be right about a number of things. Oh, Saturn's on your moon. Boy, you're really tired. Oh, yes, my stomach's been bothering me too. You're so smart. But they can't help you make decisions about where you're supposed to move or what job you're supposed to take. And they can't look at the health issues or the relationships carefully until they've done it for 10 years at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, you and I will look at your chart one day. I have your information. I'd like to do that if you want. But so like I say, you display the Virgoian qualities, but your rising sign, your moon, where your Mars and Mercury are, these things are going to have a great effect on you. Do you have a temper, or are you easygoing? Are you assertive when necessary, or do you tend to pull back? That's where Mars is placed in it. Does your mind move quickly, or do you take time in between? That's where Mercury lies.
Right.
You know, what's your attitude towards socializing and so on? And each of the planets rules many things in our lives. And the connection between them is very interesting. For example, the 6th house rules health. It also rules pets and your place of work, your job. And those things are so connected. If you have a pet, you tend to be healthier. And they use animals a great deal for healing purposes. And if you have a job that you really love, your health is better. If you hate your job, you tend to get sick a lot more. It's very connected. Very
interesting. I had no idea all these factors were in play here. You know, it's a
very complicated study.
It is, and I can understand why it would take so long to really master and understand how to properly read it and do an astrological chart on somebody.
Yeah, and that's that. You know, to the question you asked me before, this is also one of the surprises that occurred to me as I got into this full time and really threw myself into the study and into the working it within the community. Is that that it is so difficult to do it well, and some people specialize in one kind of astrology, and their chart will show that they have that aptitude. Some are general astrologers who do a number of things. I try to look at the entire chart holistically. But the more that you study it, you know, it's like anything else, like music. I got very good at music. I got so good that I realized that I wasn't that good. I was better than most of the piano players around me, and then I started to listen to the really, really greats, and I was absolutely, humbled by them. I couldn't even appreciate how good they were until I could play well.
I see what you're saying. That makes perfect sense. Let me switch things to your music career a little bit. Where can people go and listen to some of the stuff that you've done?
Well, I'm not active in the music business at the moment. I still write a few songs and whatnot, but I don't perform. On my website, there's a link somewhere there that Yale, my webmaster, put up that says music. I think if you go to Mitch Lewis, there'll be a button there and it says music, and you can listen to a CD I made a number of years ago. I've been recording since then a lot, but I haven't released anything because it's not... well... I'm not sure. I spent so many years doing it.
Well, you must love it.
It's better off where it is right now. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
but you can listen to that there. There's about 9 songs if you can find the link. It's on the website.
Mitch, who are some of your inspirations in the world of astrology? People that have inspired you to go that extra mile?
Well, I would say the writers of some of the great astrology books, including my first teacher, Isabel Hickey. She wrote one book, but it's a fantastic perspective on astrology. And then there's Rob Hand's books, are very terrific. Liz Green in England, she writes wonderful stuff. There's quite a number of good work out there. My friend Jackie Slevin just put out a new book about vocational astrology. There's so much to learn, and astrologers often will look. I have a reference library of I don't know how many books. I don't look at them as much anymore as I did when I was studying it, but they're there, and if I forget something or I want somebody else's perspective, I'll pull that book out and take a read and listen, to what they have to say.
Right.
So it's an ongoing, growing thing. I'm more impressed by astrology than astrologers.
Oh,
in other words, some of them are absolutely fantastic. Don't get me wrong; there are brilliant people out there working who have just mastered this, and they have great IQs, and they really put things together. But it's the ongoing study. It's why I want to see younger people get into it, and I hope that it continues to be popular. And my concern is that the websites, the internet, is dumbing down astrology. And that's the problem. People go and get computer reads from a website for $19.95, and they think they're getting an astrology read. And it will be the same transits and things that you'll read in one of the books or something, depending on who's put out the website. They're going to put their own books up there. And it's not bad for a student, and it's good for people to get an idea of what's going on with them, but it's not the same as an astrology reading from a master astrologer.
Sure.
And the websites and the internet in general, they take away a lot of work from astrologers. They dumb it down.
It's like fast food astrology.
I'm sorry?
No, it's like fast food.
That's exactly right. Fast food astrology. Yeah. And, and then there's sun sign astrology, which I've always had a problem with. All Virgos, all Cancers, all Aquarians are going to have this kind of a day, that kind of a day. I never cottoned to that one little bit. And I find that it actually it can be dangerous because people read, whether it's a newspaper or magazines, whatever it is, they read a quick rundown of their sun sign for that month, and a lot of them take that seriously. And then when things don't work out or the opposite happens, and it's because they have transits going on that a computer can't see. I mean, some of them can, of course. They have some very, very sophisticated software now, so they can actually give you a half-baked read that will cover a lot of issues, but it's putting it all together. And you can't do that. It's like trying to be your own therapist.
Oh, yeah, you can't do that.
Read a lot of books by Jung and Freud, and then you go and, cure yourself.
Yeah, you're too far into the forest to see the trees.
Yeah.
Mitch, once again, can you give your website out, please?
Yeah, it's MitchAstro.com. MitchAstro.com.
Mitch, would you be, can we have you on again?
Oh, absolutely, Ray.
Yeah, we're
nice chatting with you, Ed. Anytime that you get in touch with me, I'm easy. I'm in New York all the time.
Well, you're fantastic, and I really appreciate your time and your effort and your insight and your information. And we're going to give one of your books away, and hopefully we'll have you on real soon again. And I thank you again for all that you've offered here this morning.
Terrific. Thank you, Ray. It was great chatting with you.
All right. Have a great day, Mitch.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.